we have heard from the co-chairs scheduled to speak under Roundtable 1. It is now my honor to invite our guest speaker, Her Excellency Mary Robinson, former President of Ireland, former UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, and former Chair of the Elders, to deliver the keynote address on law, legitimacy, and the long arc of peace.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to speak to you today as a member of the Elders, the group of independent leaders founded by Nelson Mandela in 2007. I'd like to thank the co-chairs, France and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, for convening today's conference and for the invitation. Since the Elders' founding, we've worked to support a peaceful and just resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I share the anger and despair felt by so many around the world who feel powerless to stop the atrocities we are witnessing in Gaza. The level of human suffering and destruction is unconscionable. Occupation and violence have reached new depths of inhumanity over the past 2 years, from the horrific Hamas attacks of the 7th of October 2023 and the taking of Israeli hostages, to Israel's collective punishment of Palestinians in Gaza, including indiscriminate bombardments, repeated mass displacement, and the use of starvation as a weapon of war. International norms and standards are being abandoned and openly scorned. This conference must be a turning point towards a different future. As political decision makers, you have the power and responsibility to compel a change of course. It's time for collective action, starting with recognition of the state of Palestine as a transformative step that should be taken now. Why now? Because the dehumanizing of the Palestinians by the extremist government of Israel has reached a critical point. Let us recall that Prime Minister Netanyahu telephoned Pope Leo to apologize for the injury to Father Gabriel Ramanelli when the Catholic Church was bombed in Gaza. Prime Minister Netanyahu has not apologized for the more than 17,000 children killed in Gaza, or the many more children left without limbs and without family members. He has not apologized for all the children of Gaza who have been traumatized by this totally disproportionate war and are now hungry to the point of starvation. No apology has been deemed necessary because the children of Gaza have become dehumanized by this Israeli government. I welcome President Macron's announcement that France will recognize Palestine. The United Kingdom has said it will recognize Palestine when it would be an effective and not just a symbolic step. Surely this is the moment, because later will simply be too late. Excellencies, I would now like to address two issues. First, measures to uphold international law and end impunity for systematic violations. And second, how to help lay the groundwork for peace. It is my personal view that we are seeing an unfolding genocide in Gaza. It is for international courts to make a final determination. But member states cannot wait for this. You must act now to prevent genocide. I must say I'm particularly impressed by the recommendations put forward here this morning by the co-chairs of working groups 7 and 6. In its advisory opinion, the International Court of Justice has found that Israel's policies and actions in the West Bank constitute annexation and breach of its international obligations on racial segregation and apartheid. For those of us who believe in international law and the United Nations Charter, the stark truth is that the government of Israel has not been held accountable for its violations in Gaza and across the occupied Palestinian territory. Its leadership enjoys a high level of impunity, and measures taken to date have not been sufficient to incentivize a change of course. This cannot continue. We have a shared duty to uphold the international rule of law and guard against the erosion of basic norms that guide conduct in wartime. There are practical steps that member states should take now to end impunity and give effect to the International Court of Justice's advisory opinion, halting arms transfers, expanding targeted sanctions, and moving to suspend trade cooperation. There must be an immediate halt to arms transfers and any military, security, or other form of cooperation which assists in maintaining Israel's unlawful presence and actions in the occupied Palestinian territory. The International Court of Justice advisory opinion clarified that Israel's security concerns do not justify its illegal presence in the West Bank and Gaza, or the annexation of territory. Self-defense cannot be invoked as justification for supplying arms when the use of force is unlawful or there is an overwhelming evidence of atrocity crimes. Ensuring the security of Israelis is central to finding a lasting solution, but this cannot be achieved when arms are used to perpetuate an unlawful occupation and atrocity crimes are fueling grievances on a colossal scale. Of course, there must also be accountability for systematic violations of international law by Hamas and other Palestinian armed groups, including the continued holding of Israeli hostages. It is right that member states have strengthened sanctions against Hamas in response to its atrocity crimes against Israeli civilians. The right of the Palestinian people to resist an unlawful occupation can never justify targeting civilians in Israel. Member states should also act collectively to expand targeted sanctions against the Israeli leaders responsible for systematic violations of international law in Gaza and the West Bank. I commend the governments of Australia, Canada, New Zealand, Norway, and the United Kingdom for imposing targeted sanctions in response to the dangerous rhetoric of some Israeli ministers. To achieve greater impact, governments must work together to build on this and put in place a robust set of targeted sanctions. Sanctions should continue to be strengthened against violent settlers and non-state entities funding and supporting illegal settlements. But let us be clear, it is the government of Israel that is driving settlement creation and expansion. This is not a recent initiative of a few extremist ministers. It is an enterprise that has been advanced by successive Israeli governments over many decades in clear violation of international law. Member states should expand sanctions and other measures in response to the announcement of new settlements, such as the recent revival of the E1 settlement plan, which would sever the West Bank in two. It's also high time for member states to cease any assistance to or trade with illegal settlements. I particularly welcome the recent decision of my own country, Ireland, to advance legislation on this. I urge other states to follow suit. All existing and future trade cooperation with Israel should be reviewed with a view to suspension. Maintaining preferential trade access in such a context cannot be justified. It is deeply disappointing that European Union members have still taken no collective concrete action in response to Israel's persistent violations of Article 2 of the EU-Israel Association Agreement. Excellencies, measures to end Israel's impunity, including the ICC arrest warrants, which should be enforced, are not anti-Semitic. They are a necessary response to actions of the government of Israel, which are opposed by many sections of Israeli society. The elders stand in solidarity with the growing number of Israelis who both want the hostages to be released by Hamas and the humanitarian crisis and war in Gaza to end. We are seeing acts of extraordinary courage from Israelis and Palestinians who have suffered deep trauma and loss, but who are challenging extremist narratives within their own societies, recognizing the humanity in each other, and working to forge a common vision of a shared future. Just today, two Israeli human rights organizations, B'Tselem and Physicians for Human Rights have issued reports saying Israel is committing genocide against Palestinians in Gaza, and Western countries have a legal and moral duty to stop it. Creating the conditions of peace requires challenging the dehumanizing rhetoric and incitement on both sides that fuels hatred and legitimizes violence. Women have a particular role to play in peace building. In Northern Ireland, they came out of their housing estates and reached across the divide. Women are likewise at the forefront of many of the peace efforts in Israel and Palestine, leading civil society initiatives and creating partnerships for peace. At the political level, the Arab OIC plan for Gaza's reconstruction and recovery offers a pathway that can pave the way for a fully sovereign, unified Palestinian state, with an end to occupation and all forms of violence against civilians as part of a sustainable two-state solution. Articulating this path in a way that engages both Israelis and Palestinians on the viability of an alternative, secure and hopeful future is essential. The arc of peace is indeed long in this region, but with collective action to apply international law, it bends towards justice. Thank you.